Being able to fix a moment in time has always been essential to photography, being able to freeze a moment that lasts forever. There was common assumption that films move and photographs are still, as stated by David Campney in Photography and Cinema. In the same book, Ivor and Bloom states it's a still, it's not a motion picture at all, suggesting that the image's capabilities are limited and do not extend to represent motion. However, with the progression of photography and the gap between the still image and cinema becoming smaller than ever before, there are possibilities for movement images. Campney stated, away from the cinema we can see that photography has always had its own complex engagement with time and movement. After all, when taking a photograph we are creating an image from a moment in time. Giles Deleuze stated, cinema does not give us an image to which movement is added, it immediately gives us a movement image. I will be looking at various photographers whose works have been based around motion photography in order to explore the relationship between motion and the still image, analysing the issues and exploring the limitations. The photographers to be explored are Edward Muybridge, Jonathan Shaw and David Hiscock. Motion can be represented in a number of ways within the still image. As quoted in the book Time Motion, Edward Muybridge represented motion by multiplying a sequence of instantaneous snapshots so as to record a passage of time and movement. Muybridge would have 14 or more images in some cases to represent this motion. This was challenged by Jonathan Shaw, who specified, "We do not perceive movement as series of stills, nor exactly as cinema's 24 frames per second illusion of movement. Surely instead we sense movement as continuous in our field of vision." Shaw was suggesting that Muybridge's method was not realistic in terms of our thinking, and so produced long exposure images showing movement in relation to how we perceive it. As James Elkins suggests, reality is not made out of singular events, it is made out of the continuous happenings of things. David Hiscock took motion a step further with his transmutation series, in that the images he created were focused entirely on the fluidity of movement. Extending on from Shaw's work and focusing purely on the movement, he created images that cannot be depicted by the observer in regards to blur. James Elkins, in his book Photography Theory, stated that in the past there was aesthetic controversy among photographers as to whether a completely blurred photograph of moving objects should be acceptable or not. The viewers believed that the images needed to have an element of sharpness in them. Hiscock's images are in reality just blocks of movement, however there is an issue of looking with these images. Although he has produced some strong artistic images, the viewer at first glance doesn't know what they are looking at, or what caused this movement. When observing Shaw's images and the motion that is present, you get an understanding of where the motion developed from, because what the observer needs to know is present in the image. For example, in Shaw's image, there is the dancer present and the viewer can see the movement that has been created by the subject. Even with Muybridge's sequence of images, you get a clear understanding of where the movement developed from. And even though you cannot see the movement by looking at just one of the images, you still get this understanding. However, this is not the case with Hiscock's images, as the observer is only presented with the movement and not an idea of where it developed from. So with this in the mind, the viewer has to think about the limitations of an image and whether it can accurately represent this movement. Andrea Toma states in her article, The Everyday Image as One of Many, that Muybridge's images examine movement but seem to have left out a sense of duration, as it would be experienced in a lived moment. So you have to ask yourself if this sense of duration is needed. Is it important for being seen as accurate? Muybridge's images are known for representing motion, and it is said to be proven that the work he has produced has been done so accurately. He proved that all 4 hooves of a horse come off the ground during the midst of a gallop, something which could not be seen by the eye because of the speed that the horse travels at, and so it was not believed to be true. However, Muybridge's techniques have proven this wrong, and have shown us that in this case all 4 hooves do in fact come off the ground at the same time, and that movement can be represented. Although this still leads the observer to question the accuracy. It was stated by Marcia Sturken and Lisa Cartwright that the unaided eye could not discern this fact, because the movement was so rapid that it could not be discerned by the eye with certainty. Consequently, we are not able to see this movement with our own eyes, so we have no way of checking that what is produced by the camera is accurate. Harold Edgerton states, "Beyond the horizon of human vision lies a whole world of such unseen motion. We need to manipulate time as the microscope manipulates space. Muybridge could photograph the same horse over and over again, but we would still not know for definite. We can study the series of images closely together and see if they link on from one another, but other than that, we have no real way of checking. The viewer has to trust that what they are seeing is accurate, and that Muybridge method was trustworthy. We do not need to show this sense of duration, it merely helps us to visually understand and further trust what we are seeing. Shaw stated that his work goes beyond the moment to represent a passage of time. His focus was not the moment, but what happened after, the middle part, the section where the movement is created. It was this part of the image making that interested him. Initially, when you think about movement, it's hard to decipher whether it's actually possible for movement to be created within the image, because it's not something that is thought about. As August Rodin stated in photography theory in historical perspective, art tells the truth and photography lies. Shaw shows the fluidity of the dancers as they move from one position to the next, and it becomes more believable for you to comprehend. With Shaw's images, there is a sense of duration. This is because of how he has shown the movement within the image in a blurred fashion. Elkin states there is a tendency to photography to blur the image in order to represent motion. Shaw's method for creating these images meant that he was able to capture the movement as it happened. He did not use multiple cameras like Muybridge, which in itself improves the accuracy of the image in regards to one of the cameras not going off. His focus was the movement that took the subject from point A to B, where the motion was created. This is a successful way of showing movement. As Rodin states, in reality, time does not stand still. To portray motion to the viewer like this is effective, as the viewer can see the type of movement that took place. The motion is there in front of them, showing this long fluid movement, which makes it feel more accurate. If breaks occurred in between the movement, then this would lead the observer to believe that it was maybe taken in two images. It would make them think that it was not an accurate image of the movement that took place. However, because this is not the case with Shaw's images, and the movement is continuous till the end, it leads the viewer to believe in what they are seeing, and that the image is an accurate representation of movement. The accuracy of images is helped by the blurred movement. If the image was clear in that the observer could see each movement perfectly, it would leave the viewer to doubt the image for being too perfect. Nanning Zen and Jianu Hu stated, to represent motion is appropriate. However, in reality, we will not be able to make clear distinctions between corners and lines. So motion will not always be clearly represented in the image. However, the viewer will get a sense of what took place. Although Shaw's images appear to be accurate, dancers that are photographed do not always feel that their dancing has been accurately represented. As Yvonne Rayner states, dance is hard to see. It must either be made less fancy, or the fact of intrinsic difficulty must be emphasised to the point it becomes almost impossible to see. Although Shaw's images seem to accurately represent motion, the viewer, because of the blur of the movement and the dancer's point of view, will always question this accuracy. Hitchcock represents motion in his images by focusing purely on the movement. His image looks like blocks of different colours and patterns. It is not until you read further into the image that the viewer realises there are pictures of motion. With Hitchcock, it's hard to decipher whether the images are an accurate representation, because there is nothing in the image to judge this by. However, researching about the project allows you to understand what it is about and what the images are of. Like Muybridge, there is not a sense of duration as such. However, there is an element of time, which has caused the various patterns. It is these patterns that make you believe in the images and its accuracy to represent motion. After all, as Shaw states, every photographer makes images of time, capturing a moment that is in fact precisely out of time. Due to the unusualness of the image, it makes the viewer believe that it is an accurate representation, because it is not the type of image that is expected to be seen, and so have faith in what they are viewing, particularly because of the many ways in which a photographer can represent motion. In conclusion, motion can be represented in the still image, and it can be done in a number of ways, as shown by Muybridge, Shaw and Hitchcock's work. As stated by Joe Snyder and Neil Walsh-Allen, when our eyes move along photographs, we are not looking at distance but at time. Some of the ways motion can be represented, as shown through the stated photographers, are by having a sequence of images which lead on from one another, showing the development of movement like Muybridge did in his work. through the use of motion blur, using long exposure or similar techniques to capture the motion from a duration of time instead of simply freezing the moment, as well as using similar techniques to focus purely on the motion of the movement created, leaving the creator with a comparable style of image like his co-produced. Motion can in fact be accurately represented within the image, as suggested by the shown photographers, from the way the photographer is able to record the image exactly as it happens. However, there are a variety of reasons as to why one might question this accuracy, but through detailed examination, the viewer is able to assure that what they are seeing has been accurately represented. The technique of creating such images can be done without doubting its accuracy. It is more the accuracy of the images visually which comes under question by the viewer. This is because of how motion is presented. The person viewing the images cannot distinguish it completely, and so questions what they are seeing. Stephen Ball discusses how the observer refuses the idea that photography accurately records a moment in time in his book Photography. However, Elkins talks of how Muybridge's horse images demonstrate the movement but do not convey a sensation of their motion. The image will always be questioned in relation to accuracy to a certain extent. Ball goes on to discuss how the idea of capturing an instant has always been central to photography. The idea of motion allows the photographer to take this a step further, focusing less on the moment and in creating a passage of time. But this does not come without visual consequences in terms of the fidelity of pictures and their accuracy. However, Thomas states, it invites us to view this moment again and again.
Does anyone have any questions for Yasmin? Jane?
Why is it you chose to explore the movement within
I've always been interested in dance. I've danced from a young age myself. So I've become over time interested with the way in which a dancer moves. So I thought that trying to represent that within photography would be an interesting way of looking at movement.
Holly?
So because you're so interested in this topic, looking at the techniques that you explored, which technique do you think is more appropriate to document movement?
I think they're all appropriate, but I would say the most effective method would be Shaw's, because you get a sense of what they did in one image, unlike you do when you're looking at Edward Muybridge's. You have to look at each individual section of the image. So yeah.
Any others? Emma?
Has your research paper influenced the way that you will represent movement within the frame yourself?
Yeah, definitely. For my final major project, I'm now looking at portraying the dancer's movement in the image. So yeah.
Yeah.
In your opinion, how important is the final presentation of an image that represents motion in terms of the viewer's opinion?
I would say very important, because the way that you present the image will affect the way that the viewer reads it. So yeah, it's very important.
Any other questions for Yasmin? No? Thank you, Yasmin.